I mean, what do you expect? The Middle East isn't happy with the chaos that's happening. The conflict's expanding, and whether you like it or not, America does have a role to play. Because Biden keeps giving Israel diplomatic cover, the Arab world knows who's to blame. We have said it 100 times now. Until a lasting ceasefire happens, things will just continue to escalate. Now, I'm very glad there's a 4-day truce. Hostages are being freed, and that's always good news. But it's not enough. The Arab nations are telling America to extend the truce and to also increase aid to Gaza. And if Joe Biden was sleeping on the job, it's really time to wake up. In our lead story today, across the Middle East, America is being held responsible for Israel's war in Gaza. The Arabs had enough, and they are striking back where it hurts the most. America's pocketbooks. They are going after corporate America. And this shouldn't be a surprise. Come on, man. There's a limit to how much the Gulf can cut oil production. Cut too much and you might collapse your economy. There's also 2 aircraft carriers and a ton of US troops in the region. An embargo is a crazy idea to consider. And that's why the boycott movement is starting to grow, and US brands are now the recipients of anger over America's role in the conflict. We are talking about major food companies like Pizza Hut, McDonald's, Pepsi, and even Starbucks. This is the risk companies have when they try to mix politics together with business. It's the Bud Light controversy all over again, but it's on a whole new level. And let's understand why. Just a month ago, McDonald's Israel, the franchise there, decided to give free meals to Israeli soldiers. They distributed thousands of free meals to the IDF, and boy, did that backfire badly. Almost immediately, the franchise in Saudi Arabia decided to distance themselves from this move. They issued a statement. Neither global McDonald's nor us nor any other country had a role or relationship with that decision, neither directly nor indirectly. Let's also not forget McDonald's Oman that also moved away from Israel's decision. They issued an official statement standing with Gaza and donating 100 grand towards the relief efforts. So you can see how this backlash is evolving. It's starting to hit America's bottom line. They are making an economic statement to the US. Now, boycotts aren't great for the local economies either. They can affect thousands of local jobs in the country. But we have to understand why this is happening and how anger towards the conflict is manifesting. Businesses are now affected, and that could get worse. This might have lasting effects for Western brands in the Middle East. The Middle East is a big destination for global brands, right? We have rich countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE willing to spend. The middle class in the region is also stable and growing. There's a lot of money to be made by American brands. However, the boycotts are growing and spreading across the Persian Gulf. This is going to limit corporate profits back in the United States. In a story from Reuters, boycott campaigns over Gaza war hits Western brands in some Arab countries. Branches of Western fast food chains in Cairo appear to be deserted. And in Jordan, you have people entering Western branches telling customers to take their business elsewhere. We can't underestimate the effects of a boycott going viral. One boycotter states, I feel that even if I know this will not have a massive impact on the war, this is the least we can do. And it's really easy for such a sentiment to spread across the country and even across the entire Middle East. So you observe the pressures piling on Joe Biden. There are protests on the streets of America, Saudi Arabia asking China for help, and now US corporations are taking a financial hit. We could see America get forced diplomatically and even financially to end the war. President Biden might have to finally rein in Netanyahu and tell him enough is enough. And guess what? We might be seeing signs of this happening. America is trying to push for a longer ceasefire beyond 4 days because if he doesn't, the optics are going to look really bad. Either the US takes the lead and tries to rein in Israel, or the United Nations forces a resolution through that will most definitely crater the remaining influence America has in the Middle East. But in the long term, this boycott opens the door for other global brands to enter the region. Remember when the Western companies pulled out of Russia? In December 2021, Samsung and Apple jointly left Russia's smartphone market. But a year later, China went in and they took 95% of Russia's smartphone market share there. Now, I'm not saying that Western brands will pull out of the Middle East. I don't believe they will. The majority of brands are still American, with McDonald's and Subway all the way on top. Ronald McDonald's alone has over 40,000 stores globally, so there's no risk of going under. What I'm saying is that international brands now have wider inroads into the Middle East to compete. it might not be China, it might be just the local Arab stores that could take back market share. So this fallout could last longer after the dust settles. If the US can't get a grip on things, there will be financial backlash. The boycott against Western companies could continue for weeks or even months or even years to come. But there's another big tsunami coming, and it involves OPEC. We know the Middle East crisis has put all the oil markets on edge. There's Iran calling for oil embargoes, plus the constant fighting that escalated to Syria and Iraq. The US is also targeting Iranian oil. Biden's enforcer just told the world that volumes from Iran will come down. But those are just the sideshows compared to the main event. The world is waiting on OPEC to make a decision, and truth be told, it can swing either way. In a big update, OPEC and their allies delay policy setting meeting by 4 days. Now, this is big news because the global economy is now at a big inflection point. We have global demand dropping across the board. Japan, China, and Europe, they are all exporting less. The biggest consumer in the world, America, is also importing less as well. Imports across the board to the US have fallen, which is fundamentally bad for oil demand as well. And this crisis is reflected directly in the oil price. The price of oil has been trending down since the recent high in September. We can see this big spike up after the October 7 attacks, but it started heading down again, and today it's even lower than the October lows. Brent crude is now only at $80. And this is even with the Middle East crisis going on, as well as Russia and Saudi Arabia extending their production cuts. This isn't good news for the global economy and presents a headache for OPEC+. And here's the quandary they are in. If they stick to the current plan, the price of oil could continue sliding down and down, lower and lower, unless the Middle East erupts again. But if they cut production, this could force the price of oil back up to $85 or even $90. However, that adds further inflationary pressures to the global economy. You're going to hammer a global economy that's already starting to contract, already starting to crack. And if the global demand hits hard, oil demand will crater and collapse prices. Increasing production will also be unlikely. If they do it, they will flood the entire market with oil when demand is already coming down. We could see crude oil drop down to $70 or even $60 a barrel, and that will destroy their revenues even further. From Bloomberg, OPEC Plus says delayed meeting will be held online. The group is struggling to reach an agreement on African quotas. If we look at the new 2024 target for OPEC members, production more or less stays flat. Countries like the UAE gets to increase their volumes, while other countries like Nigeria, Gabon, and Iraq decreases theirs. So there's no net effect. However, the African countries aren't happy. Nigeria and Angola wants higher production to generate more revenues. But as we outlined earlier on, if you increase production as demand is already dropping, you might crash the oil market. And here's the issue. Saudi Arabia, who is the leader of OPEC, wants to raise the price of oil, which means production cuts have to happen or at least be maintained. MBS needs the price of oil to rebound because the kingdom's deficit crisis is growing. In Q3 this year, Saudi Arabia's deficit has increased to nearly 10 billion US dollars. You combine that with the two previous quarters, you have a fiscal hole that's $11 billion deep. And that's exactly what the kingdom borrowed a few weeks ago by issuing new bonds. So the base case is for OPEC to maintain the cuts or decrease production slightly. They are aiming for the sweet spot. They want to stabilize the oil markets without crashing the global economy. And there's another reason why OPEC is in crisis, and that's because America is complicating the oil production game. Let's recall what happened a month ago. The US decided to lift oil sanctions on Venezuela, and this means Maduro can now pump more oil to supply the world economy. This makes things much murkier for Saudi Arabia. Venezuela is exempt from production cuts because their economy is still a disaster. Due to mismanagement and US sanctions, oil production fell from a peak of 3 million barrels a day to only 700,000 at best. Oil accounts for 95% of their exports, and this is why Venezuela is increasing production like a bat out of hell. The more oil they pump, the faster their economy recovers. Today, Venezuela's output has increased to 850,000 barrels of oil a day. That's nearly a million barrels flooding the markets for Maduro. PDVSA, their state-owned oil company, also wants to work closer with the US to regain market share. And that's why when Biden removed the sanctions, it was a little suspicious, right? The agenda wasn't just because of free elections. It was probably an orchestrated step, a calculated move to counter OPEC+. America still has some tricks left in their bag. Just take a look at this chart. According to the EIA, The country with the largest proven oil reserves isn't Canada, it isn't Iran or Saudi Arabia, it's none other than Venezuela. And that's why the US is starting to pivot more towards South America. We'll likely see more and more US oil companies flood into the country to set up shop there. And if you need more evidence of America's rush for oil, I have a breaking update for you. US defense officials are now scrambling to Guyana amidst an argument with Venezuela. There's currently a territorial dispute between the two countries over the Guyanian-controlled region of Essequibo. So why are they fighting over this strip of land? The answer is very simple. There is a ton of oil underground there. In October, Exxon made a significant oil discovery that added more oil to Guyana's reserves. And this makes the total amount more than even Kuwait or the UAE, easily within the top 10 in the world. So it's no surprise that America has sent people there. It's all about securing the oil supply and making sure nothing happens to the US industrial complex. This is where things get even spicier. According to Guyana's vice president, we were never interested in military bases, but we have to protect our national interests. And that defense cooperation was being pursued with a number of countries. So now the picture becomes much clearer. Even a blind monkey knows why the US went down. Don't be surprised if new American bases starts popping up in Guyana. And if that happens, it'll be another center of power, especially in the oil markets, monitored by the US military. This economic war is not going to stop, it's just starting. Even Venezuela isn't happy about this. They are saying the US is planning on creating a military base in the region and it's all about oil. And if we zoom out to the bigger picture, this gives us a fantastic clue to what OPEC Plus is going to do. We'll likely see more production cuts happening or at least an extension of the current regime. If more oil is coming from Latin America down the road, it's better to rake it in right now because an oversupply could hit the market in 2024. Looking at the demand forecast for 2024, we can observe a big difference in estimates between OPEC and the IEA. OPEC believes oil demand will stay high in 2024, ending the year at 30 million barrels a day. However, the IEA believes a big crash is coming in Q1. Oil demand will collapse below 28 million barrels before recovering above 29 million towards the end of the year. This is a huge difference in forecast that we can't ignore. If the IEA is correct and demand plunges while the US floods the market with Latin American oil, prices could plunge even further and just crush OPEC revenues. And considering global demand is already starting to drop, this might actually be the outcome. So if a recession is coming and oil demand is heading down, it's likely that Saudi Arabia will push the entire group for deeper cuts while the economy is still standing. From Bloomberg, OPEC Plus may need deeper cuts as US supply surges. MBS might need to play the bad guy once again and push for cuts. According to oil trader Anduran, supply has been the issue, a lot more supply than expected. America has flooded the world with almost a million barrels more of output, which is driving oil prices down. This makes it more likely for OPEC to cut production once again. So we have to watch what America does in Latin America more closely because I'm sure they still have more tricks up their sleeves. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Will OPEC really cut production next week? And will the Middle East continue to boycott Western brands? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.